Let's see. So we're going to talk to D in Washington. Pronouns they, them. So maybe you can make secular Rarity cry. You want to talk about ecology and religion. So how can we help you today?
Hey there. First off, secular Rarity and Katy, you are my heroes. You guys are so badass. I think you're so cool.
Thank you.
Secular Rarity, as Sophie says, it's okay to cry.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's
And
really,
I mean,
it's cool to cry.
If you do make me cry live on air, D, that would be a prize that nobody else really has right now. So if you want to become the first, I will make a little plaque or something. I don't know.
I would love to contribute to it being a safe space for this to be a whole show where we can talk about all this stuff and everyone can cry all the time, and that the show is better off for it. You know.
Let's have an emotional call. Let's have one.
That's right. Well, what did you call us about today, D?
So I'm an atheist. I'm a Jewish atheist. I don't believe in God, but I'm really proud to be a Jew for all sorts of other reasons that are non-theistic. But that is irrespective. That's just background. Also, speaking of which, my dad, his brother, my dad's dad, my dad's dad are all rabbis.
Wow.
But anyway, that's just some background for other people, putting everything into context. I wanted to talk about, like it said, religion and ecology. And I think I guess there's like two-pronged thing here, which is, we as the atheist or in Taki, then it's often about like theists versus atheists. But I wonder about the distinction between religion and theism or deism. And I wonder about when it comes to specifically when considering ecological catastrophe, like the one that we are currently contending with, might religion as a model for how we organize both how to think about the ecological circumstances that we find ourselves in and what to do about it might not be the closest thing that is proportionate to the scale and dynamics of said disaster or catastrophe. And is that worth considering? And is that actually mutually exclusive from being able to, critique and point out the flaws in the ways in which religion has been employed, especially in modernity for the last 300 years? Yeah.
Can I make sure that I'm following with you, D?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Are you basically asking kind of something along the lines of like, would it be beneficial to have kind of more a religion style structure when it comes to dealing with like the earth heating up and us all like burning up and stuff? Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
absolutely. And let me explain why. And like I was saying, I was curious why, the difference between theism, or from your perspective, we all know deism, theism, and religion are not necessarily synonymous. But one thing I would say, whether you're a Taoist or you are someone who doesn't believe in a God but follows a religious practice, or you are a theist, is that I do think, which is a central contention and the locus of conflict or impasse between, on the show, theists and you all calling in, is contending with like, should you be expected to identify with an epistemology that requires you to forego verifiability? And when it comes to the ecological crisis and the scale of ecological thought, I kind of think that we as a civilization, but honestly, even I don't want to be biologically deterministic, but as humans, for example, supercomputers are tested out by trying to project climatological movements and projections, because it's so complex that it exceeds any capacity for us to render them in high fidelity. And I think that speaks to, yet we need to do something about it right now, irrespective of our ability to be able to observe or verify its existence. And on top of that, I want to give you guys time to react or whatever, but even people who have proof, like climate deniers, you can give them as much proof as you want. It's not really about that. Even if you could, which we can't. And so,
Yeah, I hear you on, we definitely need to do something, and it's so complicated that we don't necessarily know the best thing to do. But I think we have some vague ideas of some good things that we could be doing, like perhaps not doing loads more fossil fuel stuff, and perhaps moving more towards more plant-based food and that kind of thing. We know at least could help, even if it's not going to solve it, and if it's not necessarily the most single efficient solution. I think in terms of like mixing in with religion, I mean, certainly you could have some kind of religion or cultural practice, which, for example, everyone was vegetarian, and there are some countries where large states or areas are vegetarian, and it's often linked with religion. And perhaps if the whole world had that, then we wouldn't be growing such a lot of livestock, and then maybe that would help with climate change. And maybe that would be some kind of
farting out so much methane.
Yeah, that exactly, and that you could say that maybe that would be a positive, but I don't know if religion is necessary. Well, it's not the only way to achieve that, but also I don't know if it's necessarily the best way to achieve that, because I mean, I guess it depends where you draw the line on religion, because maybe a country, say like, so I'm in the UK, and imagine if the UK put a load of effort and money into changing some cultural practice, and they're like, oh, we're all gonna like stop eating chicken now, or oh, we're all gonna stop driving petrol cars now. You could say that like maybe that would be a thing that happens in the UK. You know, we have differences between various different countries. And maybe if we all stop driving petrol cars, you could say, oh, that's a really British thing. You know, they don't drive petrol cars there anymore. And at what point would it become a religion, or is it just a thing that you do because it's normal? Or, but I think in terms of like changing cultural practices, establishing some from establishing some kind of cultural changes from people who have authority and people who have cultural capital, that you can change the way people look at the world and the way people interact with it. So that is a positive. But also I think you can do it with like political systems as well. And I think that like capitalism is super focused and organized and very good at creating wealth and value, with whatever those sort of nebulous concepts mean. But in the process, they're very good at not giving a shit about anything else. And so that very much doesn't really go along with making the world react to climate change. And so we might even be able to do some kind of changes to the way like the economy could run, which could also change this kind of thing. Basically, what I'm saying is there's lots of different ways which you can approach this. And maybe a religion would be one, but I wonder if there's no real difference here between, we could say, oh, let's make a religion where it does this. But maybe we just want to do individual cultural practices, because trying to like create a whole religion that people stick to is very difficult, especially when people already have religions and they seem to be very protective of them. So maybe it'd be better to say, oh, rather than saying, oh, there's a new religion and you're not allowed to drive petrol cars and everyone's got to do it, or let's try and talk people into it. It'd be better to be like, hey, Christians, hey, Muslims, why don't you stop driving petrol cars? Because it's nothing to do with your religion, but it's a good cultural practice, and that's what we do here in Britain, and that's what we do here in USA. So I don't know if that's really addressed your point. What do you think, Secularity? Of you?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a couple of aspects that I think are important to highlight. It's not to say that definitions are descriptive, not prescriptive, right? And it seems to be the case that when we talk about a religion, the two main things that we're talking about are a set of rituals and practices, as well as a belief in something supernatural. So that definitely is an issue for me. I don't have a problem with rituals and practices.
I'm so sorry, Secularity.
Go ahead.
No, this is exactly the conversation I want to have about how you might. I don't know if you agree with that exactly, but and I'm not asking this facetiously, but is a belief in the supernatural essential to a religious belief, or is
I
that
don't know.
also
It seems to be
or
that it seems to be a part of every
differentiable to
D. Hang on, D.
pretty
Listen,
common? Yeah.
D. I can answer the question quicker. Just listen. I promise. So it seems to be a part of every single definition in every major dictionary out there. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm not saying that that is right. But when we just casually go look up the definition of a religion, yeah, it tends to come up with something along the lines of a set of rituals and practices that are, systematized or formalized in some way and passed down repeatedly, and people do them over and over, and some type of belief in supernatural of something. It doesn't have to be a god. It doesn't have to be magic, right? But something along those lines. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why I would personally never want to go about like turning a good cause or anything into a religion. I think a systematized set of maybe practices or rituals of some kind, where, like, I don't know, maybe we all get together one day out of the year and we talk about how great the earth is, and we specifically choose on that day to be as eco-friendly as possible or something. I don't know, that I think all of that
We already
beautiful.
kind of have that, right?
So,
Yeah, we do,
yeah.
kind of, right?
On
The other
the
just
practices. Oh, sorry. I didn't
I
want
was
to
just
cut
gonna say
in.
the other thing real quick is it seems to be the case that when it comes to religions, there actually is no set way to know whether or not you got it correct. And that's where I find a lot of problems. Whereas when it comes to things like biology, right, or mathematics, like we do actually have some things that we can do. Like they're not perfect, but they're a hell of a lot better than somebody reading a book and saying, well, I think this says to be nice to trees,
I think that's that's
right.
the kind of point I was just going to highlight is if we, I was talking about how we could come up with a cultural practice and looking at it from a top down, or if you're running the country, what's a good way of controlling people? But like what Secularity was just talking about is if we then did establish some kind of culture thing or some practices or what the dictionary usually says a religion is, that's very inflexible. What happens if the things you say to do, people are just blindly following them? And then what happens if they stop being good? Like maybe the world enters a new phase after this climate change thing.
Point.
And, what all these things we've said, or being vegetarian, or maybe, for whatever reason, unforeseeable reason, it's not good. Ideally, as the focus of this show is,
ecology,
ideally everyone would be doing critical thinking, and they should be critical thinking now and saying, hey, you know what, we're destroying the world, even maybe in my lifetime that could have a significant impact on my life and my children, so I need to think critically, see what I can do and try and change it. And then in 1,000 years time, if everyone is still being critical thinking and a new thing comes along, then they can just re-employ critical thinking rather than having some set of culture and practice, and they'll be like, oh, I'm not going to stop eating vegetables because I've been doing it for 1,000 years, and this is my religion and this is my culture.
Totally. Yeah. I think I just got to say though, that is exactly, it's often that you said that, and because that's exactly what I'm talking about, where it's specific, really uniquely specific to ecological consequences, the scale at which we need to make decisions now and contemplate the circumstances of the consequences of our actions aren't just in our lifetimes, aren't just 1,000 years, but the half-life of plutonium or the degradation of certain consumables or whatever, they're on tens of thousands of years. Yet I think that we are ethically implored to try to pursue or consider tactics or how our agency works today that can account for such a scale that exceeds what we're usually used to. And I'm not saying that religion is desirable in any way that it's been practiced, thus far. But in terms of commensurate models for how we might organize philosophy and tactics, practical tactics, I'm just curious if you all, ironically, could see how, for an unverifiable, we don't know what's going to happen necessarily with the consequences of our actions here. Just like, some stupid shit like hell, or, we have no reason to believe, we have no verifiable data to prove exactly what's going to happen, but we should do
Yeah.
it anyway.
Well, I
We
I
should do
don't
it
know if
anyway.
we should do it anyway,
Like
but I think we do know
unconditionally.
some actions are going to make
Mhm.
things worse, and some other actions are going to make things better generally. And I think
But
if
for
we
us,
stop
not
drilling
for,
oil and
yeah.
yeah, but we can never know what's going to happen if I make an action now, what's going to happen in 10,000 years as a consequence of it. You know, but
Yeah.
I'm not arguing then we should just do things anyway. I think we should still
Mhm.
look at science and the best models we have and make the best predictions we can and act on those rather than just being like, oh
Absolutely.
fuck it, we
Yeah.
don't know, let's just do whatever we want.
And I
So
think you said something that is exactly the crux of it for me, where you said, well, what if in like 1,000 years time, like, being vegetarian is somehow destroying the earth now, right? Like, yeah, most of us are probably thinking, okay, that's probably a little bit silly, but it's the fact that oftentimes a religion is not one that is open to change when new things are presented,
Yeah.
when new information is presented. And that's why I think that's what I think
Totally.
is such a beautiful thing about science. I don't care that science was wrong 3 days ago, because guess
yeah,
what? Science got it right today because we applied the methods correctly and we actually
I
have some
care about
system.
totally. I care about the negative consequences of certain science, like,
Sure.
things that happened 200 years ago in criminology and what it did for the.
Sure.
It wasn't just.
lobotomies
It
and
wasn't
that,
We've done
yeah.
bad things.
It
Yeah.
was productive, for example, of the consequence of a concept like race as being biologically determinate. And I'm saying that the scale at which the consequences of certain verifiable practices like the scientific method or critical theory in general or whatever is really specific to this subject. I agree with everything you all are saying. I guess I'm trying to say is we are confronted with a unique situation in this that exceeds all of the good practices that you all are. Flexibility to me as a queer person, as in my own political engagements, is like basically the par excellent characteristic of a good ethic, being flexible. I agree with you.
Yeah, being prepared to learn and move forwards and just do the best thing that available to do. I think it's been really good talk to you, but I think unfortunately we're gonna have to move on because we've got quite a few other callers lined up. It's been a really good discussion, and I think just having these discussions about climate change is quite important because, like, something's got to change, or we are in a lot of trouble, as maybe everyone in Florida has learned recently. I don't know, spicy times. But yeah, thanks a lot, Dee, for calling, and hopefully we will talk to you again in the future.